Welcome to the Live Explore podcast. If you like what you hear, please hit like and subscribe. Welcome everyone to the Housing Signal podcast brought to you by Live Explore. I'm your co-host, Sean Payne.
I'm your other co-host, Isaiah Chas, and today we're here with Zachary Kushel, founder and managing partner with Marin Sonoma Impact Ventures. Zach, thank you so much for coming.
Isaiah, thanks for having me, Sean. Good to see you.
Yeah, good to see you. Thank you so much for coming up here. So let's jump into it.
Yeah.
What is Marin Sonoma Impact Ventures?
Yeah, so MSIV is a local social enterprise here in the North Bay, and our goal is to kickstart a local job creation renaissance here in our North Bay community. So in the community, we have so many things going for us here, but even though we have very high levels of intellectual capital in our community, we're actually not creating jobs at a leading clip. If you look at the North Bay, and specifically MSIV focuses on Marin and Sonoma County, because we view the 101 corridor from Sausalito up to Cloverdale as kind of the marketplace and the region that we are focused on, the North Bay has lagged the rest of the state of California and the rest of the Bay Area counties in terms of job creation. And when you're failing to create jobs in a community at a healthy clip, you're failing to have things like economic mobility, you're failing to create opportunities for people at all ends of the socioeconomic spectrum, you fail to have an economic multiplier in a community that does good things for businesses, for people. And the reality here is that we're a very affluent community, Marin and Sonoma County, but next to all that affluence, we have way too many people living below the poverty line. In Marin and Sonoma County, it's about 64,000 of our 750,000 residents are living below the federally mandated poverty line. And we all know, being in Northern California, that that's not the statistic really to look at necessarily.
Right,
it's much more expensive to live here. So we want to kickstart a job creation renaissance that ultimately paves the economic future for this community and means that our kids can live here, grow up here, and have job opportunities. That is why MSIV exists. And yeah, we could talk more about how we're looking to go do that.
Holy cow.
Yeah, that was a lot, I know.
This is going to be such a cool podcast. I might as well just throw the questions away because there's so much to unpack here. There's so many ways we could go with that. So first of all, why is there this lack? Because it just seems like it's a natural fit where we're like hour and a half from Silicon Valley, right?
Yeah.
So and I've heard in the past that this area is somewhat thought. I think I've heard more like Marin County is thought of like a talent pool for coders and things of that nature. And I think Silicon Valley looks up there to pull talent. So why do we not have more startups here and VCs that way looking in this area?
Well, that's exactly the question I was asking myself in 2015 when I came to the North Bay. So I came to the North Bay to work at a company called Glassdoor, which is one of the most successful startup companies to come out of the North Bay over the last 15 years. From 2008 to 2018, Glassdoor went from 0 to roughly 500 employees in Marin County, and over that same time frame went from 0 to a $1.2 billion exit. So a startup success story, and I was going to work every day right on Richardson Bay, living the North Bay dream, and I had just come from Cisco down in San Jose, one of the iconic kind of Silicon Valley companies, where my job was to host economic development delegations from all over the world who'd come and they'd pitch us to build a factory in their province, right? So when I got up here, I had on my economic development hat, and I was trying to figure out, why did the modern incarnation of Silicon Valley go from San Jose in the south to the Presidio of San Francisco in the north? Seemingly last decade went east to Oakland, Emeryville, Berkeley. Why was the 101 corridor from Sausalito up to Cloverdale kind of this left behind corridor when it came to startup companies and job creation? So that's what kind of got obsessed by that question that ultimately led to the founding of MSIV. But to much more directly answer your question, Sean, as to why, I think it hasn't been a priority for this community. If you look at all the things we care about in the community, what are our elected officials prioritizing? Economic development and job creation is just not very high on that list. And where you'd have lots of other regions perhaps rolling out the red carpet for businesses that want to grow here. It's not that we're doing things overtly hostile, but it's not there's been a lack of prioritization here in the community. And for that reason, we've persisted in mainly Marin County being a bedroom community where people live there but don't work there. And in Sonoma County, slightly different challenges here. But mainly, we've had lots of companies that have grown and built here in Sonoma County who ultimately don't stay here. Or after they get acquired, the jobs move out, or new leadership comes in, which we could talk more about.
Right.
So that's what we're looking to change. Ultimately, if you are a local entrepreneur and you want to build what I call the next great North Bay company, and pick your North Bay company, right? The next Keysight, or the next Amy's Kitchen, or the next BioMarin, or the next Restoration Hardware, or the next Autodesk. We've had some iconic companies, Lucasfilm, right? That's some iconic companies born in the North Bay and grow in the North Bay. We want to provide resources and help for that next generation of entrepreneur who says, I don't just want to build a successful company, I want to build it here in the North Bay and ultimately be that next job creator that we're talking about.
Very cool. Very interesting. There's a huge need for housing.
Yep.
And I have a feeling that some of our the people that we've run up against in these type of it's just pro-development. People that just don't want change, right?
Yep.
And I think that's what these smaller communities in the North Bay are really facing, is that we have to adapt that way. And there's this small but loud contingency in every one of these communities that really doesn't want change, and often they're the ones that can stifle it because they have the time and things of that nature to be loud when there's younger generations that really need, whether it's housing or business development, things of that nature. We need that, but they're really busy just like raising their family and just trying to build their business right now and things of that nature.
I think that's right. And what I want to also try to do is, I think about real estate development and economic development as related but distinct items. Mm-hmm. And what I mean by that is, I think in this conversation here in the community, I think the two have gotten totally conflated. So when I say I want to promote local economic development, that inevitably brings up a conversation around housing. It inevitably brings up a conversation about traffic and people coming in. And what actually I'm talking about is economic development to me is making sure that woman in Petaluma can find a job in Petaluma, making sure the man in Mill Valley, right, can find a job in Mill Valley. I mean, you look at this 101 corridor that I'm talking about, depending on which stat you want to look at, let's just say there's roughly a 20% office vacancy rate on that corridor. And the further south you go, actually the lower the vacancy, and the further north you go, it's a little bit higher. So what we're talking about is, let's fill up those offices and let's hire local people to work at these companies that are taking over those offices. And I just don't believe there are any negative externalities that come with that. And I'll just give you an example. Like, we claim to care so much about the environment here in the community. Well, then why are we forcing that woman in Santa Rosa to commute down to San Francisco for the job that's good for her family and good for her career? Why can't we give her a great job in Santa Rosa? That's good for her quality of life and her family's quality of life. It's good for the community. That local job is going to beget another local job. And that's good for the planet. Right. Maybe we care about traffic. Well, let's take her car off that 101.
Right.
That's good for congestion. It's not bad for it. So this isn't about let's bring these big companies in and create all these jobs and have people from outside the community have to commute in to get those jobs. No, this is about creating jobs for the people who live in this community, because great communities need to have great companies as a piece of their core. And I just feel like we've forgotten that as a community and aren't prioritizing that as a community. And that is kind of the movement I talk about. I talk about MSIV, being a movement, and people kind of laugh at me and they maybe don't think I'm serious, and they meet me 3 or 4 times and they meet the people who are boosting this effort, and they do realize that I am serious and that it is a movement. But that is how we look at it, is, this is a movement to create the next generation, of the North Bay economy. And, I also just want to say, given the challenges we've had over the past 5 to 7 years with drought, with fires, with a pandemic, but, speaking specifically here to Sonoma County, a Sonoma County economy entirely reliant on wine, tourism, and agribusiness. Right. We've seen how dangerous that is. Mm-hmm. We need to diversify this economy, and that is also what we are advocating for, is making sure that there can be, we don't want to move away from those things. We don't want to change the character. That is who we are as a community, and that's what we want to stay. But we want to diversify and have these other types of jobs go along with it, that a lot of young people want, so that, a graduate from a Santa Rosa high school can go to college and, and ultimately come back to this community and have a job for them waiting here. That is our vision ultimately.
Right.
You mentioned some of those startups that expanded so significantly that upon exiting, they ended up moving out of Petaluma. What, in your experience, what are some of the reasons why they do that? Is it cost of labor, or they can't find enough labor for that?
Yeah, I think there's ultimately there can be lots of competitive challenges with scaling any business. And I don't want to over-index and say that these challenges are unique to the North Bay. I think these challenges are kind of, let's call it, germane to building a business in California in 2024. So, I don't think in the state of California you're going to see startups anymore scale from 0 to 500 employees and hire everyone here.
Sure.
I just think those days are gone. But I don't believe that the office is going away entirely, and that having a business rooted in a community is not desirable for both that business and the community. So ultimately, when you think about it, California is an expensive place to do business, and the cost for talent here is very expensive. So we don't fight against that. We encourage local companies to augment their labor force with talent in other locations that make sense for them. But at the same time, we're encouraging them to make sure they build their physical presence here and have a physical presence. So the way I'd frame that is, when these companies scale from 0 to 500, we're not saying you have to hire every employee in Santa Rosa, because that's, to your point, really difficult to do, and you're limiting yourself to a talent pool, et cetera, et cetera. What we're saying is when you go from 0 to 500, we want to see you have your HQ in Santa Rosa with 50, right?
Sure.
That is what's realistic in 2024 in the age of hybrid remote work. And that is also what is cost effective for these businesses to be, distributed in nature to a degree. But what we are absolutely railing against is this idea that businesses should be based nowhere. And whereas I would argue pre-pandemic, what we were doing with MSIV is when we were trying to get founders to build businesses here, we were competing against them putting their businesses in San Francisco or Oakland and commuting. We're now competing with them putting their businesses nowhere. So it's a very different thing that's grown up here. And the bet we're making is that the 90-minute commute is going away. But our bet is that if you take an individual and you could offer that individual 2 jobs, right? One is working from home, at a global company based nowhere, or you could offer that individual, right, same job prospect, same salary, right, same job, 10 minutes in person in their community with people they know. We're social animals. My argument is that 90% of people would rather have that latter.
Totally.
So that is what we're trying to do. We're trying to be that support structure for fledgling local enterprises to say, not only can you build startups, but you can build them here.
Right.
And you should build them here. And as a community, if we care about our community, if we care about downtown Petaluma, downtown Santa Rosa, downtown Sebastopol being vibrant, we should want to have these startup companies building in those places. If the office goes away, what does that do for local restaurants, local retail? It's all intertwined, but not enough people, I would argue, are just talking about the company piece, and that's kind of where we saw a void and why we're building here.
Right. That kind of rings true to home, because when COVID hit is when I built this, when I started this company, and everyone was saying, "Oh, real estate's going to be completely virtual from now on," and I'm like, no way. Real estate's a face-to-face business. You have to continue, and that's why we were able to get this spot at that time, because everyone was going away. I mean, has there been any pushback from people saying, no, we want to be virtual? I mean, it would seem like all the magic happens face-to-face, right? No matter what industry you're in terms of it just seems like bouncing ideas back and forth and having really good conversations, and that's where the magic happens, right?
I would say right now, everyone has their own view and everyone has their own preference on work style. Look, I have a 4-year-old and a 6-year-old at home. Working from home for me is not particularly exciting, right?
Right.
If you have a different home situation, maybe you're thrilled with that situation. So the way I think about it is, it's not our job to try to convince someone to do something they don't want to do. It's not our job to convince a business to make business decisions that aren't the best for their business, right? So if a business says, we're going to never have an office, we're going to be 100 people all remote, I'm not going to sit here and spend 3 hours trying to convince you to open an office in downtown Petaluma.
Sure.
What we want to do is find people who say, man, I've been working remote for 3 years,
Right.
and this is challenging, and we do need some physical presence. Then we say, great, we're here, our community's here to support that. So it's less about the evangelism of trying to convince people and more about helping the folks who come to these conclusions on their own, because the convincing can take a long time and isn't always successful.
Right. But I'm sure when you potentially give those people opportunities, the response has been like, oh yes, I want that. Like it doesn't take a whole lot of
I think when people
way.
understand we exist. So let me just actually take a step back and much more tactically explain, well, what is Marin Sonoma Impact Ventures and what are we doing? We're really doing two things, right? One is we are building a local startup community. And we view that as a public good, meaning we're kind of giving that away. Our company is not in the, selling services to the startup space.
Right.
We just want to help local startup companies. So we built what was called the North Bay Founder Network. This is a collection of active founder CEOs of young startup companies, all based in the North Bay. And that's everything from I'm a weekend tinkering in my garage to I've raised $50 million in financing and kind of everything in between. And we're providing community for them. So just 2 days ago, we held a founder-only happy hour down in Mill Valley. And we had 50 local founders turn out in the rain. And when I saw the weather, I said, well, this is going to be a Mill Valley crowd. No one's going to drive down from Sebastopol and Santa Rosa today. And we had probably almost a dozen folks coming down from Sonoma County for that event. We intentionally, hold our events in different places. We'll be in Petaluma, Santa Rosa, Mill Valley, Novato, San Rafael. So to try to share the love, so to speak. So that's the community aspect of what we're doing. So we have this North Bay Founder Network. There's now 167 founder CEOs locally that are part of that. Wow. We have an executive network, which is 25 local retired CEOs, former founders, other senior folks in business that are saying, I live in this North Bay community. I want to help local startups. How do I give back and help mentor that next generation? And we convene. So every year we put on what's called North Bay Next, which is the first ever North Bay Startup Conference. We've held it in 22. We held it in 23 at Sonoma State. We'll be at the College of Marin in Novato this year on May 1st, holding our third rendition of North Bay Next. Last year we put 30 plus speakers up there. None of them are imported, right? They're all live in this community. We don't bring startup folks up from San Francisco or anything like that. So that community is just all about neighbors helping neighbors. And it's kind of cheesy a little bit, but that really is what this is about is, in your backyard, there are people that could help you as an entrepreneur. And we tend to know each other in the North Bay through our kids or through, mountain biking, right? Or our some sort of extracurricular pursuit.
Right.
We don't lead with, hey, what do you do?
Right.
Which is a good thing. That's why I love living here. But I think if Silicon Valley is on a 0 to 100 scale at 100 in terms of maybe how over-indexed that is for networking,
sure.
and we're at like a 0, I kind of want to bring us to a 17, right? Where we can stay true to who we are as a North Bay community, which is, I think we're more collaborative than south of the bridge. I think we don't take ourselves necessarily as seriously, but we're still damn serious about building, globally important enterprises here. So that's what we're trying to do is build not Silicon Valley North, but we want to build a startup community that's in line with who we are as an overall North Bay community. So that's the community side of our business. And then the way we make money as a business is a venture capital fund. So MSIV Fund 1 is the first ever regional venture capital fund in the history of Marin and Sonoma County. I'm the first person ever in this community that has a pot of money and a fiduciary obligation to deploy that capital into this region's most promising startup companies. We've never had that exist here in the community before. So we raised almost all that capital from the community. So we have 62 unique investors, 92% of whom live in Sonoma Marin County. And that is a $6.6 million investment fund. And that fund is, mainly writing $350,000 seed stage investment checks into local startup companies that we believe have the potential to be that next great North Bay company. So that's kind of our business in a nutshell is a community and a venture fund, and they do go hand in hand because bringing capital to bear is super important.
Sure. Is there a certain sector that you prefer to be in, or that you've found success in so far?
That's a great question. So from a community standpoint, we are very intentionally sector agnostic. And if you look at what types of startups are being built here in the North Bay, the answer is everything. And the reason it's everything is actually quite simple, right? It's no one moves to Sebastopol, Petaluma, Novato because that's the perfect place to build XYZ business, right? Mm-hmm. They move here because they want to live here. Right. This is such a desirable place to live. And they bring to bear, 10, 15, 20, 25 years of professional history that uniquely qualifies them to build a business in, energy, or to build it in, consumer packaged goods, right? Or healthcare or software. So you see every type of business here. So if I mentioned those 167 founders that are now part of our North Bay Founder Network, they represent a wide swath of businesses. When you look at the investment fund piece of our business, I would say the sectors we've invested in, it's been more compressed, and that's just because the math in venture capital is unforgiving. Okay. So, not to get too detailed on that, but it's it's a really important in that asset class to make sure you have some outsized returns in your investments. So if you look at a company and it's a 2 or a 3 or a 4x investment opportunity, whereas that's a great investment for a normal investor, when you look at a venture capital fund structure, it really is challenging. So we look for a 20x opportunity when we look at investments. So we need to believe 2 things to make an investment. One is that, again, we can 20x our money, and that's not easy to do over the 10-year life of our fund. And the second thing we look for, given that we are a local economic development focused impact investment fund, is, can this company come to create 25 or more high quality jobs here in this community over the lifetime of our investment? And when we believe companies fit those 2 criteria, we move forward with an investment. And those investments, have represented, very different sectors, but at least to date, all 8 of those have been in some form of business-to-business technology companies.
Okay.
Have you noticed since the beginning of the pandemic, we had such a drive north of housing where we had numerous individuals moving north from Silicon Valley, Bay Area, north into Marin, Sonoma. Have you seen an uptick in startups in this region due to people moving north that previously lived in the Bay and now are living in these areas?
Yeah, absolutely. If you look at who has come north post-pandemic, there is so much new intellectual capital that has come north because they want to embed themselves in this community. And that is why I would argue this is a once-in-a-generation opportunity for us as a North Bay community to capitalize on this by investing in this local startup community. Because going back to where we started this conversation, why are we so focused on startups? Because, again, we are adjacent to Silicon Valley. This is the lowest hanging fruit we have as a community to kickstart that job creation renaissance we're talking about here. But what's interesting is that I think where people sometimes misunderstand what's happening up here is they say, post-COVID, there's now this opportunity. If you look last decade, it's really when this started to change, in my opinion, because what happened in the 2010 decade was that San Francisco replaced Palo Alto, right, as the hub for Silicon Valley, right? And what that meant was that for the first time, really, ever, Petaluma South became commutable to Silicon Valley. You were never going to commute from Petaluma to Mountain View every day. I mean, right. I'm sure we know people that have done that, and none of them would probably wish that on their worst enemy. But when Silicon Valley came to San Francisco, all of a sudden, folks who wanted to move out of the city, right, could move up here and start families up here and still be in and around technology. And I'm a microcosm of that, right? I moved up to the North Bay in 2016, a year after starting my job at Glassdoor in 2015, and I looked at who, I was 34, 35 when I moved up here, and I looked at who the other folks moving up here were, young families, and pretty much everyone I met would be working in and around startup companies. So that's where this kind of all got started in my head, was like, this is going to be that next generation of startup founders, and who is putting together infrastructure for them and encouraging them to build locally. That was, again, one of the inspirations I have. It started anecdotally, right, before I looked at the data. But the other thing is that the data last decade is incredible, right? There were 11 companies in the 2010 decade across Sonoma and Marin County that were less than 10 years old, which is the typical length of a venture capital fund, that exited for $100 million or more. And, when I discovered that, that's when I couldn't believe it when I looked at that, because I said, why don't I know every single one of these companies, right? And, Ultragenics, right, a biotech company out of Nevada, IPO'd. Glassdoor, as I mentioned earlier, but you had 2 med device companies up in Santa Rosa, Claret Medical and Millipede, both sold out to Boston Scientific. You had 2 solar companies, right? Zep Solar out of San Rafael, In-Phase Energy here in Petaluma. You had 2 fintech companies, Claremill and M Foundry, in the mobile payment space, both with very successful exits. You had Crave Beef Jerky out in the Sonoma Valley, right? Sold out to Hershey's. You had 2 telecom companies here in Petaluma, because in the 90s, right, Petaluma was Telecom Valley. This was the hub for telecom startups in the entire country. And there was this myth that has all just gone away and that there's no vestiges of that left. Yet last decade, there was a company called Cyan in the software-defined networking space, a company called Technovis, a chip maker that sold out to Broadcom. So you have all of these innovative companies operating here. And my guess is, if you were like me, you probably haven't heard of 75% of the companies I just mentioned. So part of what we're trying to change is just an awareness problem here. Like, we don't even know what's happening in our own backyard, because before MSIV came along, I don't think we were telling the story properly, and we weren't necessarily putting together the pieces. So that's what we've tried to do, is we've done this original research and said, actually, you might think, there's no startups up here, but there actually are. And hey, these 167 startup founders, you may actually think that you're the only one trying to build your company in San Rafael, but I know 20 of them right next door, and I want to introduce you to them. So that's what's been so cool about this whole thing, is with the conference, we put on a fall party every year, we do a day of service every August. When people come out and meet people who are their neighbors in their community, who are speaking their language professionally, their face just lights up, kind of like mine is right now. And they're just like, this is amazing. So much of the value we're providing has nothing to do with our business. It just has to do with introducing great people to other great people in the community, and then all these things are coming from that. Right.
That's super interesting. Maybe guys will remember that. That's the same thing I've seen in housing, is that the trend coming up here to Sonoma County was exacerbated by COVID. It wasn't started, right? It started about 10 years ago. And when we saw it happening was, I can't remember exactly when the metric, but it was like, there were for every like 6 or 8 jobs created in San Francisco, there was like 1 housing unit, and this was like 2012, something like that, and that's really when that trend started coming up here. So it's pretty much like what you're saying as well. It was like the same thing. Like, that's when that trend started. It was
Well, that's the data supporting the...
Yeah, that's what we see in housing,
what
too.
What I've been seeing anecdotally, and I love that when obviously the data is matching what you think's happening.
When you said that light bulb went on, I was like, oh my gosh, that's exactly what we saw as well. So,
and I didn't know that about the housing. So you're saying Sonoma County, that boom really started in 2012. And,
don't like hold me to this, but it was like 2012, 2014. At that point, there was the tech boom in San Francisco, where there was like 6 to 8 jobs created for every housing unit. And then all of a sudden, more and more people were coming up here, right? And willing to make that commute from Petaluma to San Francisco. So we started seeing that, and that's really kind of what's driven our housing market, a portion of our housing market over the last like 12 plus years that way. So exactly what you said. And that makes sense. It's kind of cool that now we have this kind of new culture of coming up here, and we're seeing the benefits of different people thinking different. So not just the agricultural, not just the tourism, but like the business startups. So I think that's really cool.
But what you're saying is spot on. Like, I think it's building on the richness of the past. It's not pretending that we don't have this, incredible background. It's why I come back to this idea of why is Sonoma County not the hub for ag tech in the country? Right? I mean, we have the intellectual firepower, we have the ag background, yet there's a heck of a lot more ag tech innovation happening in Silicon Valley and in the Central Valley than there is in Sonoma County. So how do we change that? And I think there's some local organizations like the Sonoma County Wine Growers that have been doing some interesting things around the farm of the future, trying to start a conversation around that, and we want to play a role, obviously, in that. So yeah, it's not let's shift away from these things and entirely go to these things. It's not let's have it all complement each other, right? Because we need to be investing in this local economy. Right. I come back to that idea that how do we raise the awareness of this issue here in the community? Because if you say what are the 5 or 10 biggest things plaguing Sonoma County right now, or even Marin County, I don't hear people saying job creation and economic development. Right. I have people saying, what are you talking about? Like we're doing great. And it's like, well, yeah, let's juxtapose our unemployment rate, which is very low, which measures the number of people that live here. Do they have jobs? Juxtapose that with the job creation metrics.
Right.
A lot of those jobs that they have are not in the community.
Right.
And that creates problem around people having to commute out, right, for work and other people commuting in. This is the big challenge in Marin County, where you have all these, all this intellectual capital, all these affluent folks doing jobs that they don't have necessarily in the county. So they're commuting out, and the only jobs that we're doing a good job of creating in Marin County are, have been more service-type jobs where the individuals performing those jobs, because of the housing crisis, can't afford to live here, so they're commuting in. So, yeah, we need to solve that in 2 ways, right? One is we need to figure out the housing piece, which is not what we think we can fix.
Right.
We want to be an advocate, but we need to come together, all stakeholders in the community, to fix that. But the second piece we can fix is the job creation piece. It's create more jobs for the people that live in the community. And the future of jobs as we see it, as I said, is hyper-localized. So we are not saying, as MSIV, we want X location in the North Bay to be the hub for startups, right? And we want everyone to come here. Instead, we're saying, you want to build Isaiah in Sebastopol? How do I help you do that?
Right.
Someone over here wants to build in Tiburon? How do I help you do that in Tiburon? You want to build in Healdsburg? Great. We'll help you do that.
Right.
So by kind of being nowhere, we're kind of able to be everywhere, if that makes sense. Because we want every community should have its own, social working, co-working space that is a hub, right? I think that's the future that we want to see.
Sure.
And it's a good future for our downtowns and for our planet. So who wouldn't want that?
Right. It's we have that conversation quite a bit, actually. So every community has like a different set of issues and problems, but is there like 1 or 2 problems that like really you like wake up every day and you're like, is there a bottleneck, or what are like a couple of issues that you just really face on a day-to-day basis that kind of makes your job difficult that way?
Yeah, I think if you were to talk to any leader in the North Bay and you say, what are the 2 biggest kind of intractable problems? I think there's consensus that's housing and transportation.
Sure.
And then I would say, equality and inequality is probably right up there with those issues. I think we're well aware of what those issues are, which is kind of the first step of addressing the problem.
Right.
I don't know. I don't know. Chime in if you think there's debate on that. But I think finding solutions to those issues has been challenging. I think you take something like the SMART train. We need to figure out how to make that work. And I think it's only going to work if we can, supplement the SMART train with housing and companies on that SMART train corridor.
Exactly.
That's such an important piece of making that work.
Right.
So I think there's a lot of leaders in this community doing incredible work on aspects of it. And I just get excited when the community can come together and say, we're doing this. And obviously, again, the housing thing, the state's now gotten involved. And you could argue some good that's come from that, and some bad, but I think we're seeing change.
We're starting to.
We're starting to. It feels that way. And again, I've only been in this community for 8 years. Mm-hmm. So on the one hand, that's my biggest weakness and my biggest strength, right? I think the weakness is I don't necessarily have 30, 40, 50 years of history here, so I need to really educate myself on that and talk to leaders who've been here a lot longer than I have, so I understand why we are where we are.
Right.
But the strength of that is you can come here and ask questions and say, why is something this way?
Right.
And have everyone give you the conventional wisdom and just be able to say, I don't think that's right.
Yeah.
And this what happened to me when I started asking this question when I got here. I said, why are there not more startups here, and why is there no startup community here? And I heard all these, oh, well, these are the suburbs. Right? They're all in the city. I'm like, well, Walnut Creek, Pleasanton, Dublin, Mountain View, San Mateo, all those are Bay Area suburbs, and they have much more vibrant, business clusters, startup ecosystems than we necessarily had up here in the North Bay. So I don't buy that argument. Or, that the people don't want startups here. People don't want companies up here. I mean, every person I talk to wants more local jobs, wants a cleaner planet, wants, people in this community who need economic mobility, who are trying to, work their butts off to get ahead in life, to have that opportunity. So I like to reject a lot of that conventional wisdom and just take a zero-based approach and say, where are we as a community? Where can we go? And that's why MSIV was founded. There was a lot of people that said, "This stupid idea."
Right.
Or why do we need this? Or whatever. And I just didn't agree based on my own assessment of the situation and talking to leaders in the community who went out of their way to make sure MSIV was successful. And that's what's been so amazing to me as a newer arrival, getting the support from folks who've been here 3, 4, 5 generations, and having them saying, yes, we need this, and for them to get involved has just been so heartening and amazing. And we're now starting on our 5th year. We're only here because literally dozens of leaders in this community have gone out of their way to make sure we're here. And that's been really cool, and I'm just really fortunate to have amazing people surrounding this.
I think that's what's so important, though, is you have that knowledge and expertise from those people who grew in the community for 5, 6 decades, but then also the outside view, because without that, you need that outside view while also the historic knowledge in order to proceed, right?
Yeah, I think so, and I think, and I've had people say that to me. I've had a few supporters say, yeah, no one who's from here ever would have founded this, because
right.
It would just be like, why would we do that, right?
Sure.
Kind of, and I come back to I have a master's in public policy, and again, I spent those 3.5 years at Cisco, like doing kind of global government and economic development work. So I think it took that mindset as a fresh arrival to the community, saying, how do I put my mark on this community and make it better, to say, wait a second, we have all the elements here to have a robust startup community,
right? And
there's nobody putting together the pieces. Why? And like any good startup, that's the kernel of an idea, and that's where we got started.
Is there, this is kind of vague, but is there anything that you mentioned there's 2 factors that you need a 20x investment,
sure,
and also you like to see 25 local jobs.
Yep.
Is there anything beyond that, again, very vague, that you look for in a startup that you can see it has potential to be successful?
Yeah, I mean, look, it's a conviction business, right? So the question is, how do you develop conviction? And ultimately, at the stage we're investing in, it's a bet on the founder, and it's a bet on people, and that's, we take a very people-centric view to it. If you look at kind of our website and list our portfolio companies, you go to most venture capital websites and they just have the logos of the companies. And we have the logos of the companies and the pictures of the CEOs and the names of the CEOs, right? Because as much as we're backing a company, we're backing neighbors. Like, I want you to know who this CEO is, not as some, faceless leader of some esoteric company,
right.
But this person, right, is a Mill Valley dad and has 3 kids and coaches lacrosse on the weekends, right? Like, that's kind of, it's what a community fund, I think, should be doing and can do that other funds aren't. But, the important thing for us, and we say this to all the startup founders we're working with, it's just not to be transactional, because again, that's the antithesis of the community we're trying to build here. So, for us, we're going to interact with literally hundreds of startup companies who have dreams of building that next great North Bay company. And the intent out of our first fund is to back, somewhere around 15 of them. So it's 90% plus of the local startups here aren't going to get funded by us.
Right.
But that's okay. And that's just how a venture capital fund works. So what we're trying to do is, again, like other funds, we'll meet with 30 companies, say no to 29 of them, but it's not have a nice life. It's, we still want you to engage as part of this community, because even though we're not funding you, maybe we know a different investor who's a better fit to fund you, or maybe there's someone in our network who can, coach you, mentor you, help introduce you to new customers to get to the point where a year later you come back and we do think you're ready for funding. So we try we try to kind of have a whole piece, and that's why we're a 2-person team. Our VP of Community, Elizabeth Murphy, is running the community aspect of what we're doing. I'm running the fund aspect of what we're doing. So we try to keep it like church and state a little bit because, and obviously, there's crossover, but we don't want people to look at MSIV and say, oh, there's my money, and if I can't get money out of them, I don't want to interact with them.
Right.
We want people first to see us as a community. And the capital piece, again, is how we monetize, how we make money, and ultimately how we kickstart a North Bay startup flywheel effect. But it's important that, I think people view us as a movement and a community first and a fund second rather than just as some other fund.
Right.
There's plenty of funds out there. What we need here in the community is an org that can, kickstart that job creation renaissance and really try to be a resource to everybody involved.
Very. How do people find you? How do you find the startups? Like, is it networking, or are you have your ears out there? You're looking at economic development. I mean, exactly. Like, how do you?
Yeah, I mean, when we got started, it was 100% outbound from me. Hey, I noticed you're building a Petaluma-based startup company. I'm trying to help local startups. I don't have any money. You want to get coffee? And a lot of people said yes. That goes back to kind of the roots of this community and how people are thirsty, right, to be engaged and as part of a community bigger than them. If you look now that we're entering our 5th year, our brand presence has grown pretty considerably to the point where we are getting a lot of inbounds now, which is fantastic. I still do a lot of outbounds, right? If there is a startup that comes on my radar that we don't know and we don't have a relationship with, we want to reach out and build a relationship with and know that you're here. But as you might imagine, it's warm introductions, right? Between our investors, our executive network, our founder network, what I call just friends of the fund, there's literally hundreds of people now in this community that kind of serve as our scouts.
Right.
So the dream for us is when your neighbor puts her head over the backyard fence and says, hey, Sean, I'm a week into launching a startup, here in Petaluma. I want the first words out of your mouth to be, oh, you got to go talk to MSIV, right?
Very cool.
That's how we know we've arrived, and I think we're getting closer to that, but we still have a long way to go.
Right. So you've been in 5 years now.
Yeah, we're just starting our 5th year, so we've done 4 years.
So kind of like on that note, like in 10 years, where do you want MSIV to be within the community, and where do you want like the startup community to be like in the North Bay? Can you just and it's cool, dude. We dream big here. So tell us your vision that way of like what.
I love that question because that's what we're all about is painting that vision. I mean, you wake up, 10 years in. The whole idea is that no one's asking this question anymore. Of wait, what? There's startups up here? Wait, what? There's a local venture fund? Wait, what? There's dozens of people that have been there, done that want to give me advice in the community for free. It should just be known. Like, this is who we are as a North Bay community. We're serious about building the next generation of businesses here in the community. And we want people to come out and help that. And that's what we need to figure out is, we've been shouting at the hilltops about this, for 4 years. And, you probably polled 99 out of 100 people up in the North Bay. Have you heard of MSIV? And I'm sure most people say no. So that's why these platforms are so important for us. Everything just takes time. And I think our thinking is sound on this. It sounds disingenuous to say we're genuine about what we're doing, but we're genuine about what we're doing. Like
that comes across.
I appreciate that, but we want to just help everybody. And I think, when everyone realizes that's what we're here to do, we're here to help people, and we're here to build a robust community. I think there's no limit to where we can go. And to me, it's less about where's MSIV and it's much more about where is the community, because it's the same thing, right? If the community is further along,
then
we're going to be fine. Right? Because ultimately, from our investment fund standpoint, we're just the middleman, right? We're the ones that are investing in the entrepreneurs, that they're really the job creators. We're giving them infrastructure and air cover. So if the startup community is healthy and we had a role to play with that, there's going to be plenty of investment opportunities to the point where, imitation is the best form of flattery. If there's 4 other funds just focused on this community 10 years from now competing with us, we've really arrived, right? And this community's arrived, and people are noticing, oh, yeah, that's the North Bay startup community, distinct from Silicon Valley, but next to Silicon Valley. And, yeah, there's some amazing, globally prominent changing companies that were born there, and it's such a cool place to build a community. And it's kind of what Boulder's been very successful at doing, building a brand for themselves as a startup community. And there's a lot of similarities to the North Bay and Boulder, which we don't need to go deep on, but Techstars is a well-known incubator born there, and they've, one of the founders there, Brad Feld, wrote this book called Startup Communities, which when I got started here was one of the Bibles for me. Uh-huh. It was literally a book on how to build a startup community, and they've been at it 30 years. And, so the idea isn't necessarily original. It's actually quite borrowed. Just no one's ever tried to build it here. And what I've discovered, in not just reading that book, but talking to counterparts in other parts of the country, is that there's no one way to do this because it has to be done in a way that works for that community.
Sure.
So we're doing this the North Bay way. That's all I got. Uh-huh. And if we try to do it a different way, it's not going to work. So we need to stay true to that. We can't just say, yeah, this worked here, it's going to work in the North Bay. It's why we've spent time just building relationships with other institutions and just trying to make this a collaborative thing. If we're all collaborating, we're fine. The other thing I just want to really call out is we very intentionally put Marin and Sonoma together in this because so many past efforts have stopped at the county line. And if you look at Marin and Sonoma County, those are two small counties. You put them together, that's 750,000 people, $50 billion of GDP, which is greater than 2 U.S. states. This is a formidable economic region together. You put them apart, it's too small, too local. And you see this all the time, right? A company will be founded in Fairfax, and when they want to open their first proper facility or production facility, they go up to Petaluma.
Right, there's so much interaction.
That's
already.
Great. Like
Right.
If I was a Marin thing, that's bad. And if I'm a Sonoma thing, so it's we're all part of that one region, and I think it's important. Like we want, especially Southern Marin. There's a lot of talent, a lot of capital. If we can get Southern Marin to look north instead of south to San Francisco,
right,
and to see Santa Rosa as germane to their life in Mill Valley, we've also won because trying to build a more cohesive, North Bay community is super important, and it's why we're so focused on this regional approach.
Very cool. Again, I'm trying to stay on topic. This could go so many different ways. I feel like there's a whole other podcast on planning and city planning and stuff like that I'm not going to touch. Is there anything else that you'd like that we haven't touched regarding MSIV that you'd like to get across? I think you've done an amazing job.
I appreciate that.
I love your vision, man.
Thank you.
I really do. Is there anything else that we haven't touched upon?
No, I just want to give everyone air cover to go build here. Like any doubt you have, can I do this in Petaluma? Can I do this in San Rafael? Can I do this in Santa Rosa? Can I do this in Sebastopol? Like the answer is yes, you can. Other people have done it. They've been successful and they want to help. So you are not alone. There is a startup community here. And I think so many of the resources, in our history have been geared towards local small business, which is amazing. Like we are the mecca of small business here in the North Bay. But we've done that and kind of neglected the startups. Right, and the startups have kind of sprung up more organically, not because of the things we're doing as a community, but in some ways in spite of that. So what our whole thesis is if we can actually, there's all these resources available for small businesses. If we can build a similar set of resources available for startup companies, and I mentioned those 11 companies last decade that exited for $100 million or more that altogether created hundreds, if not thousands of jobs here in this community. If we can bring this infrastructure to bear, and we had 11 without any infrastructure, how many can we have over the next decade?
Right.
30, 40, 50? Like that's what gets me excited to get up every morning and continue to build this community and try to help local companies because the sky's the limit when you look at the intellectual capital in this community. I mean, I don't have the metrics on this, so this is me speaking just kind of anecdotally. Like one person's smarter than the next, more impressive than the next. And they all love this community. So as I think about the North Bay, we're already at the epicenter of buy local, of eat local, of donate local, right? This is the go local community. This is an invest local movement. And when I say invest, I mean both your intellectual capital, your mind, your time, and also your financial capital. But if we could get all the affluent people in the North Bay to just start investing in their own backyard, make it that much easier for local enterprises to spring up. I mean, it's a brighter future for everyone, and it's a future where ultimately, I got young kids, right? We're never leaving this community. I want them to be able to come back and have a job for them waiting, right? I mean, that's why this matters, right?
Job in-house.
Yeah, well, no, but everyone, you're right, but everyone says that. Like, can my kids afford to live here?
Exactly.
And that's a huge problem. But what we neglect to ask is, let's just say they can afford to live here. Are they going to want to live here?
Right.
And if there's no jobs for them here, the answer is no.
Yep.
So we need to also create jobs. Like, that is so important, and that's what I've been yelling about for 4 years, is kickstarting that job creation renaissance. So that's the vision, and again, we're making a lot of progress, but this is the top of the second inning. So I'm just excited for all that's ahead. I view MSIV as kind of a 25-year arc, and we're entering year 5 here. So, but there's no reason why we can't get there. All the elements are here in the community. We're just trying to put together the pieces.
Very cool.
Yeah.
If someone wants to invest with you, or if there's a startup out there that wants to talk to you, what's a good way of getting in touch with you?
The best way to touch, MSIVfund.com is our website. And, my email address is on there. Elizabeth's email address is on there. And for startups seeking capital, there's an intake form to submit your information. We very much want to talk to startup companies here and just see how we're able to plug you into what we're building.
And I'll add on to that, as someone that we found you without knowing you, reached out to and was shocked because typically we wouldn't even expect a response, and I think you responded within the hour. So for anyone that is interested in reaching out and learning more, please do. You've been awesome.
Thanks,
very attentive and responsive. It's awesome what you're doing. You've filled a gap in what we think has not been addressed. And it's really cool seeing the outside perspective that you've had, but also tying in your local experience and bringing that in.
Well, thank you. And I just want to thank both of you for inviting me on this podcast, but just, for building community, because we all need to do our part. I mean, that is the whole piece here. We're not going to solve all the North Bay's problems, just our one small organization, but we have a role to play with startups and capital and mentorship and all that. You guys are doing incredible work here as well. So let's just give everyone in this community air cover to be leaders in the community. And that's just, maybe I'll just close with that is, as I said, like, I've only been here 8 years. And what's amazing about this community is that you can be a new arrival and decide what your issue is, then you want to go lead on something and actually go be successful in doing that. Not every community is like that, right? If you're not from there, if you're not a third generation person, like, doesn't matter how well-intentioned you are, genuine you are, but the North Bay has been so accepting, and my wife and I, we both run hyperlocal businesses, and it's been absolutely amazing for us. So I'm excited for everything that's ahead, and I just want to give everyone who might be listening to this air cover to whatever you're passionate about. Go lead in the community, because it's possible. You can do it here.
That's awesome. Yeah, that's awesome. That's a great way to end right there. Thank you very much for listening to this episode. If you like this content, please hit like and subscribe. See you in the future.
Welcome to the Live Explore podcast. If you like what you hear, please hit like and subscribe.